a lot of people, when they play in minor keys, they think, okay, I'm going to just get my minor pentatonic scale. Okay, let's say we're playing in A minor. I'm just going to rip A minor pentatonic scale over the whole entire chord progression. And that's definitely an approach. So there's nothing like completely wrong with that or anything. I'm not going to come on here and tell you that there's something wrong with playing a minor pentatonic scale. But with that being said, we want to explore some different possibilities, and it can be a lot more fun when we know just another couple of things that we can do besides playing the minor pentatonic scale. So I've written out a few licks that we're going to be using in today's video. So we're going to be going over a couple of them, and then actually as a separate video later on, I'm just going to upload a short video of me playing through all the licks so you guys can have it for reference. But we're going to be kind of taking our time and going over some of the ideas from the licks and seeing how we can actually apply them to our improvisation. So let's go ahead and start with the first lick. Let's hear it again. What is going on here in this chord progression, first of all? So this is a very standard chord progression in a minor key. So one thing I like to do, by the way, if you've noticed in the past when I put tabs on screen, is I like to have the actual chord progression listed over the tabs so that we can actually do a little bit of analysis and comparison to see, well, what exactly is being played over what chord. We're not going to delve too deep into all the individual chords, but let's just do a quick overview here. So we have our A minor chord, then the next chord's G. So it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, F. And then E7 is going to be the last chord, and then just kind of loops back around. So we got that just happening over and over. You have probably heard lots of variations of this chord progression before. For example, just right off the bat, I'm thinking about the song Stairway to Heaven. Right there at the end. That's not the exact same chord progression, but it's very similar. It says A minor, G, and an F, but it doesn't have that E7. So this E7 is actually very, very common to hear. And why is that? Well, that's because the E7 is the 5 chord of the A minor. So you notice how when I play that chord, E7, your ear really wants to hear this right after. It's kind of this tense chord, a dominant 7th chord. A lot of times, that's how we know actually a song is in a minor key, by the way, is that you'll have that dominant 7th chord taking you to a minor 1 chord. Sometimes people ask me, well, how do I tell? Because there's the relative minor and major. How do I tell if a song's in major or minor? A lot of times that's a dead giveaway right there, is if you have a 5 chord that's taking you back to the 1 chord. Anyway, so last thing I'll say about the chord progression is if you're going to put it in other keys, I like to think about this as a 1, minor 1, major, flat 7. So why am I calling it flat 7, by the way? Flat 7 is because normally we think of the chords in a major key, and the 7 chord is normally a half step below the 1 chord, but this is a whole step below, so we call it flat 7. So 1, flat 7, flat 6, because if we were in the key of A major, the 6th chord would actually be an F sharp minor chord, but this is F, so it's a half step lower than what the 6 normally should be, so we call it the flat 6. So 1, flat 7, flat 6, and then 5 as a dominant chord. First of all, one thing that's really important to do once you've learned all your scales and stuff, like your A minor pentatonic scale, is then you need to actually like learn some vocabulary that's going to help you use the stuff you already know, but make it sound better. Have to implement different techniques, different ways of combining the notes that you may not have thought of before. Learning vocabulary is the way to go once you've learned all those fundamentals of the fretboard so that you can learn to navigate. Then you need to learn vocabulary so you can actually sound musical. You can see that it's really based on this little idea right here. Okay, I'm going to take two notes and slide back and forth between them. And then. So, what's going on here? This is actually all part of the A minor pentatonic scale here. So this is part of like the first position. And then second position, so we're sliding between the 5th fret and the 7th fret, just going back and forth. Have you ever done that before? If you have, congratulations. If you haven't, congratulations, you learned something new. So now we're gonna go up to the 8th fret of the 2nd string and slide up to the 10th fret and back. And then, same thing on the 1st string. And then finally, up to the 10th fret of the 1st string, sliding back and forth, okay? All right, so we got this little bit of lick. So, one thing that you'll hear me talk about a lot on this channel is the idea of being able to take like a simple musical idea and move it around within the key, within the scale. So that's really that whole first measure of the lick is just an example of that, okay? Saying, oh, I like this idea, just sliding back and forth between two notes. Well, what if I just transfer that over to some other notes that I know work in the key? I could do it anywhere. Right? And it sounds really cool because when a normal person who's not a musician listens to you playing, they're going to think, oh, that's a very clear musical idea. It sounds logical. It doesn't sound like, oh, you're just running a bunch of scale stuff over and over and over and over again. So you're going to notice that's a theme here that I talk about all the time and that we're using here in that lick. So that's not even the best part, though, that I want to talk about yet. So I want to talk about the line that happens afterwards. So, ooh, that note right there. What's that note? That sounds like a different note. So, if you notice, if you look at the tabs right there, see where the E7 chord is? That's where this note that I just played lands, the 13th fret of the 3rd string. And if you're familiar with reading notation at all, you'll notice that there's an accidental right next to that note above the tab. There's a sharp there. That is a G sharp note. And why is there a G sharp note there? Because that is actually part of that E7 chord. And that note sounds really cool. So here's a little trick to find that note, okay? No matter what key you're playing in. Let's say you're playing an A minor pentatonic, right? You just go a half step down from the root of your key. And that's going to give you that note. What is that note? I'll just tell you really quickly. That G sharp note is the 3rd of the 5 chord. So every chord has a root, 3rd, 5th, and maybe a 7th. If it's a 7th chord, this is a 7th chord. It has a 7th. And so the 3rd is one of the most important notes in a chord, but particularly in minor chord progressions, when you have that 5 chord, it sounds very exotic sounding, right? But if you add that note in, there's different ways to think about it. You could think of it as the harmonic minor scale, but you can even just think of it as, hey, this is minor pentatonic, but if I want to, I can just add that note right there. And if you time it correctly and you land on it right on that E7 chord, when we're playing, then it's going to sound really cool, and it's going to sound like you really know what you're doing and you're really actually playing the chord changes, okay? Now we just took a piece of this vocabulary, a little snippet of this piece of vocabulary, and I realized, oh, wait a second. I looked from seeing the chords on top of the tabs and I saw that note and I realized, oh, wow. If I play that note there, then that's going to sound cool. So if you know nothing else, okay, we don't even need to learn a new scale or anything like that. Let's just pretend we're just going to keep thinking about A minor pentatonic scale over the whole thing. We just add one more little teensy weensy piece of information, which is, I say, okay, I find my A's in the A minor pentatonic scale, so I know for sure that if I'm starting here with my pentatonic box, I have this one note, just one fret below, okay? And then up here, same thing, right? The high E and the low E strings, the same thing. So this note here. So what if I practice soloing just with the A minor pentatonic scale, but when I hit that E7 chord, okay, I'm gonna make sure that I hit a G sharp. Of course, I don't have to do this every single time, okay? Every new thing that we learn, guys, in guitar, every new concept, it doesn't mean, oh, you need to forget about all the other stuff you've learned before, and now this is a rule. You must play the G sharp every single time you hit the E7. No, you don't need to do that, but it's a cool thing that you can do that helps you sound more legit. Like, you're not going to do that by accident. Most people, I don't know, maybe there's some guys like, wow, if I just put my finger on that fret, I don't know why, it just sounds really good, and I don't know any music theory, and I'm awesome because I have amazing ears, and I just figure out that, you know, if I put my finger in a random place, it sounds good. But anyway, I digress. So let's try, I'm going to just mess around with A minor pentatonic, but when I get to E7, I'm going to play this note here. And then, by the way, last thing I forgot to mention is you might want to resolve it back up. So that note will sound a little crunchy if you're not playing on the E7 chord, okay? And we can test that out too. So let's see what that will sound like. So there's the G chord, F chord, and now E7. So you got to keep track of the chords going by. So F, E7, A minor, G, F, E7. Remember, on that E7, that's where I'm going to play that G sharp note, okay? Let's try it. Right, so all I was doing is I was just thinking of playing A minor pentatonic. I think maybe I played a B note or something in there that wasn't part of the A minor pentatonic for a second. But for the most part, all I was doing is playing A minor pentatonic, and I was just aware of that one chord, and not even like, oh, I need to learn all my arpeggios of E7 and learn all this extra stuff. All I just thought of is targeting that one specific, what I like to call the key note, okay? It's the key note in that progression is that G sharp, okay? So if nothing else, guys, after this stream, I just want you to take that concept away, is that if you have that 5 chord on your minor chord progression, watch out for that, what we call, by the way, I didn't mention this before, it's called the leading tone. The leading tone, because it wants to lead up. Da, da, ba, da. So if you hit that leading tone on that 5 chord, it's going to sound super cool. And of course, you want to use cool techniques like sliding and hammer-ons, pull-offs, be tasteful and all that stuff. That's all way more important, okay? I understand all that stuff is more important than some kind of theoretical thing where I hit a particular note on a chord. But if you have all those things, you play with taste and you play with good time feel and you play with cool articulations and stuff, and then we add in just that one little teensy weensy note all of a sudden, we sound way more legit, okay? So with that being said, let's go ahead and check out another lick. This one is a little bit tougher. As you can see, there's a lot of notes on the page. All right, so what is going on here? We're going to check out another concept, okay? A little bit more complicated, right? So the first concept that we checked out was relatively simple, right? So the whole idea that I wanted you to get out of that is, hey, you can just keep doing all the same stuff you've been doing, play A minor pentatonic all over the whole entire thing. But now we're going to dig a little bit deeper into the actual chord progression that's going on here. And this is something, this lick, you would not ever come up with this unless you knew the chord progression. Okay, so this is one thing that I have people start working on when they want to really take their soloing to the next level, is actually being able to understand the entirety of a chord progression on a chord by chord basis. So again, we're playing the exact same chord progression: A minor, G, F, and E7. Okay, so what's going on here? So we're gonna check out this little arpeggio, actually. And actually, you might have heard this before. I can almost assure that you've heard it, okay? It doesn't matter who it is, maybe Jimmy Page or Joe Walsh. You hear this exact same concept. We're actually just playing an A minor triad. So wait a second, I'm on an A minor chord. Well, gee, I can just play the notes that are from an A minor chord, but I don't have to just be like, oh, here's my A minor, my open A minor chord that I know. Like, those aren't the only notes from an A minor chord. So I want to understand how to spell it out in order to work out all of my arpeggios. By the way, this is something that I talk about and we go in super detail in my course, the Jamsville GPS Fretboard Fundamentals course. You can check that out over at jamsville.com if you're not familiar with your arpeggios and stuff like that across the fretboard. But we're going to learn some of them right now, even if you don't feel like doing that. So this is a freaking awesome way to play an A minor chord. So this is actually all the way up here in the 20th fret. I'm almost about to run out of space. That's a C note, okay? So in an A minor chord, there's an A, C, and an E. That's the triad, and then there's also a G if you add the 7th. But anyway, so we're playing an A on the 20th fret. A C on the 20th fret, an A on the 17th fret. So we're pulling off. And of course, this is 3 frets away. Ordinarily, like if I was playing this down here, I'd be using my pinky. But when we're all the way up here, we can have more flexibility with the fingerings that we want to use because, well, frets are closer together. So I'm pulling off from the 20th fret to 17th fret, by the way, playing a downstroke, okay? And then I'm going to play an upstroke on the 17th fret of the 2nd string, which is an E note. So it's literally all the notes that are in an A minor triad. Now, all we're going to do is transfer that same concept down to all of the different chords that are in this progression. So the next part, we just go like this. We repeat that twice. And then we do one more pull off. We don't play all 3 notes. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. That's the idea. Is we're taking our arpeggio. We're going 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. And then we're going to move to the G chord. And guess what? We're going to play all the notes that are in a G chord, which is G, B, and D. Well, guess what? We're not going to play them in that exact order, okay? This is, by the way, it's called an inversion, okay? Because the G is not the lowest note, and in the A minor arpeggio as well, the A was not the lowest note. But anyway, so we're going to play this. So we're pulling off from the 19th fret to the 15th fret, okay? And same thing, by the way, same picking pattern. So down, pull off, up, down, pull off, up. Okay, that's the picking pattern that you got to get used to. And just if you're really having trouble with this, then just make sure you play one of these over. That can be such a cool actually thing. If you just practice that, you can learn how to shred pretty hard. Like just learning one of those arpeggios. But so we start with this. Same thing. It's the same sort of orientation of all the notes. This is actually the third of the chord, which is B on the 19th fret. Then the root of the chord, which is G on the 15th fret. And then the fifth is also on the 15th fret. By the way, you might be a little bit like having a little bit of trouble with this. So you want to try to make sure that these two notes that are on the same fret but different strings, you want to make sure that they're not ringing out at the same time like this, like kind of like a chord. We want to make sure that we just very slightly roll our finger down like that. So also don't try to hop your finger down like this. That's not going to work when you're playing really fast. Now notice that when I do it, I'm basically just holding my finger over these two frets, and it's just it's so hard to see when you're playing fast. You see my finger shifts so slightly so that I stop hearing the first string and now I can hear the second string, okay? Anyway, so now, since by the way, that's a G major triad, the cool thing is that on this particular progression, whatever it is that you play, like over the G major chord, if you work out an arpeggio, well, guess what? You can just move the exact same thing down 2 frets. So now, an F major triad, the exact same thing. So we have same exact shape, okay? And this, by the way, I'm definitely playing with the pinky. Even though we're pretty high up, it's just easier. I mean, it's theoretically possible, but it's a bit of a stretch. I don't like doing it so much, okay? Now, getting to the E7 chord. So those of you who are a little bit familiar with 7th chords, you should know that a dominant 7th chord actually has a major triad. And the only difference between a dominant 7th chord and a major 7th chord is the 7th, okay? So, with that being said, you can actually play the exact same thing you just played on the F chord, F triad. You can just play an E triad. It doesn't matter if it's major 7th or anything like that. So, actually, we only need 2 shapes to play this really cool arpeggio sequence through the whole entire thing. We have the A minor shape, which is the same shape, by the way, but since it's a minor chord, this first note is 1 fret closer to the second note. And then once we get to the G major chord, now the first note is 1, 2, 3, 4 frets away from the second note. But once we get to that G chord, guys, we just move that down a fret, and then move it down 2 frets, and then move it down 1 fret. So, one thing is you could just play it straight through like that, or you could just mess with the notes in it. So you could go like, kind of sounds a little bit Cuban or Latin. By the way, those of you who don't know, my last name's Hernandez. I'm half Cuban. I'm from Miami. So maybe that's why that kind of resonates with me a little bit. So let's actually try that. First of all, I'll play the sequence as is. I'm not going to play the whole lick. I'm just going to play that first half of the lick. And then I'm just going to mess around with those shapes on each chord and change the order of the notes, change the rhythm a little bit. This is, guys, I want to also always make sure you guys understand this too, okay? The reason why we learn about music theory and all this stuff is so that when I learn a lick, like from Jimmy Page or whatever, my favorite guitar players, I can actually understand what's going on, and I'm not just memorizing like what tabs to play and all that. And because of that, Then here's the thing. Understanding's fine. Some people go, oh, who cares if I understand it? I play it sounds good. Who cares? Well, here's the thing, is that if you understand it, you can actually then change it and make it your own. And isn't that really what we're trying to do, guys? We're trying to, right? Like, we want to learn how to sound like us. That's what I'm here to help you guys to do. I want to help you sound like you, okay? I don't want you to sound like a copy of somebody else. Obviously, we all have our influences, and you can hear them coming out. But as soon as I take a lick that I learned from somebody else, and then I change the rhythm, or I change the order of the notes, or I change any number of things about it, if I change just one little thing about it, now all of a sudden, it's mine. Right? Now it sounds like me. And when you guys practice these ideas, okay, you are going to play something that sounds different than what I play. Okay? It's like pretty much impossible for two people to like come up with the exact same idea using a concept, right? So that's one thing that I want you to understand, is that when we learn a lick, it's not good enough to just learn how to play the lick, although that can really help. It can help your technique. But I want you to then take it and practice, and then be able to actually change it and go, oh, wow, I see that it's using this idea. Let me mess around with that idea more. Let me move that around the fretboard. Let me change the rhythm. Let me put some slides in there. Whatever it happens to be, changing anything is going to help you start to sound like you and build your vocabulary further, okay? All right, so let's try it. I'm going to play through that sequence, and then I'm going to modify it a little bit. So now let's try messing with those shapes. That's just doing that in a one like little area of the fretboard, right? So you can see that you can have a lot of fun with that. So now all of a sudden I took that lick and I changed it. Okay, so did I, think that was the greatest solo in the entire world? Well, of course not. That's not the point, okay? The point is that I'm taking some time and I'm working in a piece of vocabulary. Oh, this is cool. If I use that idea, putting the arpeggios over the chord progression, let me see what other things I can do with it. What if I try to play it faster? Let's do one more thing. What if I try to play with 16th note triplets? Let's see if I totally epically fail at this. Ooh, that's a little bit different. Now it sounds really shreddy, right? Oh, there, now I wasn't shredding on all of them. I just picked one note from the next shape. So, shred one, shred. Oh, now I kind of like that more, right? It's a little bit more balanced. It's like a little bit of shredding. And then I picked one note on the next chord. Whatever it happens to be. So, again, guys, I hope that you can tell that this is like so much fun for me. This is one of my favorite things to do, is to take a piece of vocabulary, and I like calling this taking it to the lab, okay? It's like, ooh, I'm doing some experiments with this piece of vocabulary. And this is really how you actually get your improvisation better. You first of all, learn your fundamentals, right? So that I can navigate the fretboard and I can go through that basic process of improvisation and know that if I play all these notes, they'll sound good over the chord progression and learn how to play in time. Then once I got that down, learning some vocabulary, learning to play a lick note for note, right? That's going to really help because it's going to improve my technique. And then, though, having the creativity and the wherewithal to be able to actually use the fundamentals that I know about, analyze the lick that I just learned, and then sort of dissect it into like little pieces and mess around with those in real time while I'm soloing. So to me, if I learn this lick, we haven't even really talked about the end, and we probably won't talk about the end because the end is just, it's this. It sounds cool, but to me, if I just get one little nugget of information from that lick, which is, I'll play these triads. And now all of a sudden, by the way, I didn't even bring this up. We weren't playing minor pentatonic scale, were we? Just saying. Okay. Again, nothing wrong with minor pentatonic scale. Those of you who have been watching ever since I started the stream, nothing wrong with it. Now you can mix this in with it though. So let's actually try that. So I'm going to just mess around with minor pentatonic and I'm going to use all of the different things that we've talked about in this stream and then we'll start wrapping it up. So to recap, of course, we always start with just ripping minor pentatonic scale over the minor chord progression, but we want to sound more legit, so we add in a couple things, okay? Number one, we learned that if we take the note that's a half step below the root of the key that we're in, so in this case, the root of the key is A, so I take that note that's one fret below A, G sharp. If I play that over the E7 chord, it sounds really cool because it sounds like I'm making a chord change and I'm playing a super important key note in the chord. Da, da, playing that movement. Da, da. And then also, if I can just even find like one little spot, let's just say I don't know any other triads on the neck. Well, I found one spot to play through them. And that's better than knowing 0 spots, right? Right? 1 is greater than 0. Yeah, we can all agree on that. So, I can just mess around with those specific arpeggios that I learned from this piece of vocabulary, and then that idea of using the G sharp note on the E7 chord, and then besides that, just using some cool phrasing and stuff when I'm playing over my A minor pentatonic scale. So let's give that a go. Make sure you check out Jamsville GPS Fretboard Fundamentals course. Make sure you download the 5 awesome guitar licks in the A minor with the practice track. You can find the link in the description, and you can also find it there in the pinned comment in the chat. And also check out Jamsville merch store, the link in the description below. We got lots of cool stuff available. Check out my music on Spotify. Look up Adam Paul, that's my artist name. And yeah, guys, until next time, listen, learn, and jam.